deck. If you haven't been playing Hearthstone recently, it's because you know everything there is to know about this deck. So either way, you know what Mage is about.
Yeah, and I do just want to highlight, as we are getting into our game at number 2, that of course the big thing is Lunacy, right? Like, there's not even a doubt. But I think close to as strong a point for the Mage is that it fares well without doing the Lunacy stuff, and that's why the deck gets the win rate it has been doing recently, because of course Lunacy boosts your win rate massively, but the deck just performs anyway as just a spell mage. So I'm already excited to see how this first game, at least for us on stream, is going to go for Warma and his mage, going up against RDU's rogue once again.
Yeah, I tweeted on day one that I had incredible success with Spellmage with the list that was very, very different for this, because it just did not have Lunacy in it, because as not a memer, I forgot that card exists. Like, that is just not a relevant Hearthstone card to my brain. And I went 20-6 on day one with Spellmage with no deck of Lunacy in it whatsoever, and then immediately everyone else who had already discovered Lunacy Mage just messaged me saying, Sottle, you are a moron, why aren't you playing the best card in the game right now? At which point I went, oh, okay, put it in my deck, and then within 2 games was convinced that yes, this was in fact the best card in the game, and I am a moron.
Well, already here, Warma doing something that is very frustrating for his opponent, no doubt, is when this mage deck just gains board early as well. Don't play any minions, but they get them. So already RDU slightly on the back foot here. He does have Cutter Butter there to do something pretty big at some point, but as we were talking about before we got rudely cut off in the previous game, judging when to commit resources and when to hold is such a big deal here. But it looks like RDU's saying, okay, let's go. Potion of Illusion, get this combo right back again and get it even cheaper to really go off next turn with card draw and, you know, basically chunking a ton of resources.
Yeah, going to use these pen flingers now here as well, just to try and cycle a little bit, find himself, I was going to say, ideally a spell because of that prep that he has in hand. He did have the opportunity to potentially Shadow Step to deal with a 2-1, draw another card, but I think now potentially prep Wicked Stab might be something he is interested in doing, because I think RDU will want to protect health as much as possible in the early game, because this is when we talk about, you know, alternate win conditions for Spellmage that is not Deck of Lunacy. Burning your opponent down is the top of that list, right? Like, if they do not hit Deck of Lunacy, it is essentially a burn deck. It's going to throw fireballs at your face, it's going to throw a Pexis Blast at your face, it's going to clear your board and then throw a Mask of Cthulhu at your face, and then you're going to be pretty dead. So I do very much like protecting health in the early game as much as possible.
Yep, so RDU got off a good turn last turn, but now is the one he can really go off with this field contact and the Cutter Butter as well. Oh, double field contact. This is just a lot of cards. I do like starting with the pen flinger. Draw some cards first, then take a view on what there is to actually do. He might not even need to go with the Cutter Butter this turn. A third field contact. He could probably draw his deck, right?
Probably, yeah.
If he wanted to. Not necessarily will, but...
Yeah, with the right sequence of draws and shadow steps and preps and so on, he could probably get somewhere very, very close. But yeah, worth knowing that, you know, kind of dunking on the other part of his late game combo in the previous game that we only saw a slight fraction of. It does seem that this one, the Cutter Butter, does seem to have more auxiliary value than just being the game-ending combo, because of course that combination in the deck alongside the Ambusher allows you to do 4 damage multiple times very cheaply with Potion of Illusion. But you can see here Cutter Butter is just a crazy card just for mana ramping, right? If you can get multiple copies of it, it discounts big cards, it digs its way through the deck. So this clearly is not a card that is as difficult to carry in the deck.
I'm really surprised with that end of turn from RDU. He could have Shadow Stepped something, and at least, you know, to save some of this or save a key minion. He's going to burn a card now, and yes, that was going to be my point. Of course, you could say it was a 1 in 12, but the problem is...
I'm sorry, I just want, like, how does this work now? Like, is his wife dead at this point? I'm not sure where we stand.
Schrodinger's wife.
Yeah.
The one you don't hear about. But yeah, this was a big deal, wasn't it? Because he chose to play Mankrik. He could have Shadow Stepped something and created some room in his hand, but by not doing so, he gave him that was something that could happen.
That was an incredibly morbid joke for match 1 of EU Grandmasters 2021.
Stars, you mean to go on, Sol?
Yep. Good.
Still, he's basically -3 damage and not a 310 on the board, which is a very big deal. But RDU still has a full hand, still has a ton of burn. The Wicked Stab #1 comes out. He's got another one in hand. So there's still a ton of damage. It's just there just could have been more. I think there was an option to Shadow Step that turn.
It cannot be stated in stronger terms how much of a big deal not having a 310 here is. Like, as you said, it's 3 damage and also not a 310. And having huge health minions on the board against Mage is so relevant because of Mask of Cthulhu in particular, when they use that as such a late game burn strategy. As it stands, I think his start was just so disgusting that it absolutely does not matter. But certainly in a closer game, I think that could have been a real punishing decision. Yeah,
basically Warma just got pushed off the board very quickly that we saw earlier on in the game, and it's just not been able to fight back. And this is the age-old issue with fighting Rogue is, okay, I can flame strike this 2 2-1s and a 4-4. Oh wait, that's my whole turn. And they're just RDU's just killing Warma with just not really a lot, but it's always enough. I feel like this is lethal, sort of, with Tenwu.
He just has it, right?
Correct? Yeah, it just has to be.
Tenwu Shadow Step.
Stab. Yeah.
Yep. Because it enters the hand now, which means it does max damage. It's not when you draw this, it's when this enters your hand, so that is activated for 4 damage. So he should be able to now set this up just straight up for Wicked Stab lethal on the following turn.
And there's pretty much nothing to stop this. Obviously, Ice Barrier RDU will not need to attack. Counterspell, he has about 1 million cards that he could proc a Counterspell with. And outside of that, there's no way for Mage to gain health. It's one of the few weaknesses Mage has right now, is that it doesn't have a consistent way to gain health without Deck of Lunacy and 100 Libram of Hopes.
Yeah, the deck is quite linear, which is one of the weak points that it does have. Like in this situation, as long as you can, as RDU have here, a spell to test for counterspell, then you have guaranteed lethal in this situation. Just fire off that Wicked Stab to get the job done, and that is going to be a clean 1-1 now for RDU. So that deck I was, hyping up as a potential problem point for him in the series, passed its test at the second port of call, I guess, with Flying Colors. That was an incredibly oppressive looking game of Hearthstone against the Terror deck of the format. Of course, it wasn't Lunacy on 2, it wasn't the absolute high power level that he could have played against. I think it's going to be that thing again where, like, Spell Druid always draws the nuts in APAC. Now, Lunacy Mage always draws the nuts in APAC. I think that's what we're setting up for now. But still, a risky version of the deck from RDU, and it's paid off. It's beaten the big meta Terror, and it's squared up the series for him. And now, suddenly, this series is balanced a lot more finely than it was looking just 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and of course, this is a different version of Rogue that we're going to see predominantly throughout the weekend. But that's the thing with Rogue right now, I feel, Subtle, is it's got so many powerful tools and routes you can go down that just because no one else is bringing it doesn't necessarily mean the deck's that bad or anything. It just means it's just taking a bit of a different approach, as we saw with that, the Tenwu, the Ambusher combo, that honestly, I've played a lot of Hearthstone in the past week, and I've not really seen even that really on ladder at all. So you can definitely see when RDU mentioned this was an original sort of idea from Casey, that it's been kept, quietly to the side, I guess, not really tweeted about until post-submission, because I think there is something to that deck. Whether it's those 30 cards, we'll find out and we can talk about, but still, you did see the damage get there. And for me, one of the maybe less flashy cards, but stars of Rogue right now, is just Wicked Stab. It's so much damage, there's not really much you can do about it, so who cares about Eviscerate now that that card exists. Warma is going to be queuing his Secret Libram Paladin here, and personally I think we're going to form the same opinion here. Not really fans of Kazakus over in Europe for your 2 casters here, but still the deck overall looks pretty reasonable to me outside of that.
Can someone tell me why this card's in the deck? Like, at COL_Sottle, just tell me. Like, it's so bad. Like, even... Okay, so step number one, if you don't understand the criticisms here, like, actually half the time the card just straight up doesn't work, because when you discount various numbers on your Librams to the point where they cost 4 mana and they are in your deck, your Kazakus doesn't work, because it is live updating as to whether you have any 4 mana cards in your deck to be able to deactivate it. Even when it does work, it's generally a 2-turn setup in the mid-game from like turn 4 to turn 5 to maybe get a tempo swing with like a 5-mana golem, or you go for the 1-mana golem and get like a very small tempo swing in a lot of positions. The alternative of just playing Cariel, whatever the card is called, 4-mana Argent Commander, in the alternate slot, that gives you a tempo swing immediately in 1 turn. It's a Rusher with Divine Shield that mana cheats your hand. Like, I don't understand this at all.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened with me is I played the 1-3 on 1, fast forward my life a couple of turns, dropped the golem and realized I had Libram of Justice in my deck and was like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that does nothing. I've just played a 4-mana 3/3. But it's going to be RDU's turn now to be on this Spell Mage. Only running the 1 Flame Strike. I'll be honest, a quick glance. Is it Ring Toss that's actually doubled up? That's normally the single here that's the swap? I believe it is. Yep. So yeah, RDU going for a bit more of a preference towards the Secrets and the Flame Strike. So again, that might be also another nod to leaving Mage up, because I do think the extra pair of Secrets is actually more valuable in the mirror than 1 more Flame Strike would be. But there's also a kind of a strange effect as to how that affects Deck of Lunacy, right? Because any altering of the mana curve changes the way Deck of Lunacy, or the consistency of Deck of Lunacy at its current power level.
I think it's super interesting. Like, I'm fascinated by this deck because it's such a cool... RDU's a gamer. RDU is just a gamer. So I'm fascinated by this deck because it's such an interesting deck building decision. Because the spell pool is so limited and so redundant at the moment, you can really manipulate how your deck is built just by the cost of which spells you're going for. It's why you see people playing Cone of Cold and Secrets in their deck, because the 6-mana slot is so good for hitting card draw. Yeah. 4 out of 7 of the 6 drops gives you a card draw. So you want to put 3 drops in your deck so they turn into 6 drops and you draw cards. I think, weirdly, cutting a Flame Strike and adding a 4-mana card is actually an anti-aggro buff, because you're gaining a Ring Toss in your deck, which gives you access to Ice Barrier and various things that can help you to fight for board. But then you're also adding a 4-drop to your deck, which turns into 7 drops. And the 7-mana spells are ludicrous against aggro decks. You have Soul Mirror, Cycle of Souls, Flame Strike itself, of course. You can just get Flame Strike back, but for 4 mana. Yeah. You have all these incredible tempo swing tools that you can use against aggro decks. So I think, weirdly, it's very strange to say cutting a Flame Strike makes you better against aggro, but I think that is potentially true.
Well met.
Yeah, and that is just why it gets very, very interesting with the deck building. But yes, guess what? Warma got his 2-mana card that's very, very strong at the moment with the sword. So we'll see how that plays out. RDU, of course, have it. I think you actually just have to be forced into checking that secret. And in fact, of course, it was Oh My Yogg, something you do not want to play Deck of Lunacy into. So RDU is going to be delayed a little bit, but honestly, I think as long as he can get the Deck of Lunacy before he has to refresh in Springwater, he's probably okay.
I honestly think this is just a mistake from RDU, though. I think the correct play this turn was just to ping face, because then next turn you can proc the Oh My Yogg with your 1-mana spell and then just rip Deck of Lunacy. I guess he can do that with Font of Power anyway, but then you are potentially giving up a Font of Power to Oh My Yogg, which just isn't, is actually a good card that you would actually quite like to have.
Yeah. And that's it. I was just going to say as well that the second swing can get him the second Oh My Yogg that he has to get with. So he did test it. He did get away with it. So he knows it's not that at the moment. And now the game will really begin, Soto.
Yeah, particularly now RDU is curving directly into refreshing Springwater. Although, again, he does have to deal with Oh My Yogg.
Also, I've actually found that I've been playing a ton of Paladin today. I found that the Prime is really good in these types of matchups where health is important. As you mentioned earlier, you can get burnt down in some situations by Mage. And this Prime, along with what you would hope to be a ton of Librams later on, can actually cause some real issues in a lot of matchups.
Sorry, you've lived long enough against Mage to
Oh, yeah.
a promo.
I am really good at curving with Paladin.
To be fair, my stats are heavily favoured with Paladin against Mage as well. But as is a discussion I'm sure we'll have many times, I think Secret Paladin's stats on ladder are massively inflated by people just not thinking about secrets at all during any game of Hearthstone.
I have raised a few eyebrows at my opponent's turns. I'll tell you that for nothing. Here, though.
Every turn, you just have a 3/4 horse in play. That's just the rules when you play Secret Paladin. You just get a free horse every single turn.
Ooh, okay. Wound, prey. Okay, maybe not to his own face is what he'd be after, but still.
Germination it, Pog.
Yeah, if he plays Archaeologist, he procs the horse, right?
Probably just ends up being a ping then, right? We can test here first. Yeah, now doesn't see the secret, so he does just have to ping.
Yeah. Oh, well, you better play that while it's active, because in a turn it might not be.
Yep.
And
pretty good here, right? Again, you do have to just track the comparison of like a 4/3 Divine Shield Rush is also extremely good here when it discounts 4 cards in your hand. Like it actually ramps you for 4 mana here if you had the alternative card that it was up against.
Yeah, and honestly, I know it's situation dependent. One of the players disconnected. We'll be back in a minute, don't worry. But I know it's dependent on situation, but generally, if the game plan's going okay, what are you looking for from Kazakus, honestly, as Paladin? Are you always going for this 5 if you play Kazakus on curve? Do you want the buffs? Do you want rush? Do you want duplicate stealth?
I mean, I think it depends. I think, again, people will have to go through the process of learning that 1-mana golems are going to be very underrated for a long time, and people should start paying attention to them nice and early so we don't repeat the mistakes that we made for a very long time with the last Kazakus. Because, you know, if you look at, like, the keyword itself does not scale, right? So if you just want poison or you just want rush or you just want whatever, you can pay 1 mana for it instead of 5, which is an enormous difference, right? The only thing that scales outside of that is the amount of damage your poison is going to do, for example, which, like, that's nonsense, right? If you're looking for poison deal damage, you might as well get it on a 1-mana golem instead of a 5-mana golem. There's just various examples where, you know, just taking 1 just to spend your mana, for example, because you have to wait 1 extra turn to play a 5-mana golem, whereas you can play a 1-mana golem this turn, can also end up being very relevant. But I think in this spot, where you just play it on 4, you are generally just going to take a 5-mana tempo golem to drop on the following turn on turn 5. So you're looking for Divine Shield, Duplicate, Stealth, just all of those make a sticky board kind of golems, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we just see now the couple of choices, they weren't really choices, but a couple of the spells RDU got were in fact some removal. He got them over there to clear up that board. He has Rancor now as well to help out, which is pretty useful versus Paladin, right? Obviously he probably wants, you know, the Nagrand Slam draws, like the insane stuff, but some of this AoE definitely isn't too bad right now. Even the Arbor up there putting something on the board.
And there is one of those choices I was talking about. Fell Guardians coming into the hand. That is one of those 7-mana spells, which can be very effective against aggro decks that your 4-cost spells will transform into. Summon 3/1/2 taunts, getting discounted for every time a friendly minion dies.
Observe and reflect.
And although people probably have a lot of things to say about this mage deck, it does throw you in some interesting scenarios, right? Where, yes, you know roughly the kind of cards you'll get, but then you have to make them work in that given game. And again, I was even looking at weird stuff like the potential of Mozaki Germination and what that means. Is it realistically going to stick? Does it force out, you know, a Libram to clear it up? Because that's something like high health minions at the moment in Hearthstone do very well. They're actually pretty hard to clear.
Yeah, I did look at that too, but I think the problem is if there was a clear on the other side, like if there was a Libram of Justice on the other side, and say damage went face on that turn again, you're in trouble, right? You'd be at like 7-8 health, and suddenly you're just almost always losing the race to a like 1 Penflinger even at that point. now RDU gets to make this same play, but with the extra insurance of the Fel Guardians coming down behind it, which I think is a very, very big deal. I think it's a good spot from RDU just to allow himself to make the same push, but just by waiting one extra turn, he secured and protected his health a little bit more guaranteed by setting up those extra 1-2 taunts as well.
Yeah, I like this a lot, and weirdly enough, not only is the high health obviously just good for a minion, but now Warma's, even at 30 health, must be feeling under some pressure here because the double Mozaki with cards such as Mask of Cthulhu and some other damage cards that could come out, like that is a nightmare. The game could end very quickly and maybe not in the way we expected.
Yeah, could be anything. Obviously, the cards that start in the deck, the Fireball and the Apexis Blast, are not there, but they can still be there. They're to revisit old themes. It's Schrodinger's Fireball, whereas the original ones might not be in there, but any 1-mana spell that started in your deck could be transformed into a 1-mana Fireball. So the chance of having burn in your deck to draw to pay off these Mozakis is still very much in play.
Yep, 2 costs into Apexis Blast, for example, as well. That there is plenty to look at, and double Mozaki makes pretty much any one burn spell push so much damage. But Warma here does have the 2 jugglers, so now I always call them jugglers, penflingers, sorry. So now he can make all of this work if he can just get hold of those spells every turn to bounce them.
Worth noting that currently this Chaos Nova does do exactly 7, which is
looks good to me.
Perfect in this spot. The problem is how vulnerable you've seen double Penflinger, right? That's the issue. So, you know, Chaos Nova to push a little bit of damage and then you have 2/3/1s. It's not actually that appealing, is it?
Yeah, what if it's ever just Nova ping go? Like you just leave everything else.
What does that achieve, though, Raven?
Well, the problem is,
There must be a way.
I think it's more just he needs to keep these resources going because at the moment he's drawing the weird draws you get with Lunacy sometimes, where it's like the anti-aggro Lunacy, where it's all just AoE board play. And I think maybe he just needs to buy time. And if he plays Fel Guardians and then a Libram comes down and everything gets Penflingered down, then it's just a whole sort of wave of threats behind, I guess. I don't know. He did just go for the mask instead.
Yeah, and just even taking that line in the first place is debatable. You know, the Raven is making a compelling argument. But even if you decide to take that line, the number of attacks is heavily debatable as well, right? Because we can see if RDU had like, potentially attacked twice, that could have paid him off better. Leaving the minion at 1 health and then casting the mask, but he hoped to clear it and just be able to go face with the other minion and not proc Avenge. That didn't end up happening, and then because he didn't attack already with his other minion, there's no way he's shipping into an 8/4, right? So very, very difficult choice on just how many missiles you're expecting to hit in each individual target there.
Yeah, and this is, really bad news.
Yes.
This is where RDU really wants to do those draw Libram of Hopes off the top for the rest of the game. That Mage does have a tendency to do in these kind of matchups. He does still have Chaos Nova, which is going to help. Does still have Fel Guardians to follow up with, but these Penflingers do just simply put you on a clock, unless he could maybe... I guess there's no real way for him to get the... for him to devolve this, right? Yeah, Siphon Soul's a good pickup though.
Siphon Soul is good, yeah. Unless you have a Devolving Missiles in your hand, it's incredibly difficult, nigh on impossible, to find it after Deck of Lunacy. There are ways that you can wrap yourself back around to discovering it off a minion that you've generated from something else, so nothing is impossible, but yeah, just having a Devolving Missiles in your deck is not possible.
Hey, loser!
Really, is RDU playing off the top now. Again, he can kind of clear a board, I guess, until he sees this Reliquary Prime hit. If it is going to be that this turn, I guess not now. But he can kind of clear a board, but it's just... Warma, I think, has just drawn enough to keep the pressure on. If he would have had a dead draw, this could have been survivable for a lot longer from RDU, because there's only so many Librams he can play, right?
Yeah, and not even with one more dead...
Okay.
With one more 0 mana spell there for Warma, RDU would have just been dead that turn. He needed to deal 9 damage. He had 9 mana with which he could spend on Penflingers. He just needed to be able to consistently bounce them for 0 mana, but did not have the ability to do that. This needs to be additional protection, and is RDU back to the filth that we saw from him last season, Raven.
It's always right time, right place with him, isn't it?
There is that 0 mana spell, though, which means Warma does have the opportunity to spend masses of mana on his Penflingers, but I think I do like getting the Reliquary down myself.
I am only more deadly.
Yeah, he probably has to, right? Because this can just this Libram is on 1 health now. He can't just let it get pinged off, right? Oh, he could heal it now.
Oh yeah. That would have actually been so rewarding. If he'd have just skipped the Penflinger and looked at his 1 mana minions first, which of course isn't a mistake, it's just an option that you could have made to just say, well, maybe I want to play an extra 1-drop here instead. Then having that additional Voodoo Doctor to heal up his 10-1 out of ping range would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh no, RDU! Only your last 2 top decks have both restored health when you needed them to. You're so unlucky. How dare you draw a Dark Portal?
Lunacy giveth and lunacy taketh. It's like, because that is horrible. Literally a nothing card in there.
Yep.
The only thing that's good for is proccing a potential, third Oh My Yog or something in this game.
Right.
There must be a way.
Now the attack heat goes up to 18. Yeah. Problem is he's still just kind of dead, right? Because he's at 18. The Librams buff the Taunt up to 8, so he just needs 10 straight damage from Penflingers, which he can do, right?
Yeah, I believe he can do it, yeah. Because you always get the first 2 Penflingers, then you just add the spells, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't me. Hey, loser.
And goes Pen Libram. He has 6 mana left to spend. I think the Wisdom just ends up being too expensive here, though, actually, because he needs to cycle them twice more, right?
Wasn't me.
Yeah, he doesn't get them.
Oh, is he just off? Oh, okay. And this is one of those weird games that does happen now and again with Mage, even when you Lunacy, is you can get too much of one thing, right? Like, arguably, RDU just had too much removal and not enough of actual proactive spells, and that was a struggle. Sometimes you don't get not any removal, but you don't get enough removal in certain situations. But yeah, that plus card draw has really been ruining him right now. We didn't really get the Skull, the Hand of Gul'dan, or anything like that, right?
Yeah, he did not get any of Gul'dan's body parts in this game, which is a big issue. But that is for... all right. That I will allow that salt. That's fine. But yeah, I think card
salt, subtle.
The card draw is the one that you can really narrow it down to, right? Because you can talk about, okay, he didn't really have good enough removal, he didn't have good enough board development. The card draw is the big kicker on that, because as soon as you hit the card draw, you do have all of those things because you've hit the card draw, right? You've drawn the way through the deck. So not hitting a Skull or a Hand or a Sprint or anything like that in the early turns can end up being a very big deal. But, you know, you're never going to have too much sympathy for the Lunacy on 2 player. Right? Like you've already drawn your Keleseth, you know, that's already essentially a high roll in terms of how the game's going for you. So, you know, losing from that position, I'm going to struggle to feel too bad.
Yeah, we've all been hurt too many times to be able to be too upset about these outcomes. But yeah, a little bit frustrating there for RDU. I do think it is just the card draw. But, you know, the deck does have that certain amount of, you know, sort of up in the airness about it, right? Like we saw the double Chaos Nova, the Fel Guardians, some more AoE. Those are good cards, but without actually ending the game yourself, it just wasn't to be there for RDU. No Libram of hopes to even extend the game either. So a little bit rough there, but it does mean Warma takes game number 3. So he is going to go 2-1 up, and he's got his own mage to play now, Sottle.
He does indeed, yeah. And you can see how frustrating RDU finds that. I think, you know, when your mage loses, it is going to be a big problem for... Sorry.
I'm now deaf. One sec.
Same.
Ah, there we go. I've just muted. I don't know what that was. And you guys hopefully didn't hear that, but we just got deafened. So it looks like Warma does have his mage left. He still has mage and a priest on RDU's side to keep up with that. So I'll be interested. Hopefully we see the priest. I can probably have a quick check to see what he's going to queue. I do believe it is going to be mage versus priest. And I'm excited here. One mage mirrors and mage mirrors, but I do just want to see what that priest has got, especially against this mage list. So sorry guys, we're just sorting out some crazy technical issues where someone's trying to burst our eardrums, which is pretty funny. But I have muted it again now after I checked it worked. But you can hear me okay, right, Sol? Have you muted it? No? Okay. There we go. I'm just letting Sol know what to do so he can actually hear me. Can you hear me?
Genius. Hello, Raven.
Yeah, there we go.
Apologies for that. I just had the sound of the apocalypse in my headphones for the last 30 seconds, so could not hear anything that was going on.
I do love, though, that the saving grace is me just messaging Sottle, just mute the program that you're hearing it from. And it's like, oh, yeah, we can do that. Anyway,
there's like 4 different programs I've got open. I didn't know which one it was coming from.
Excuses. So, as I was talking, now I know to myself about, I am excited that we do get to see this priest go up against the mage. I think it's going to be a pretty, one of those matchups that is going to really tell the tale of how good this priest deck can do, because right at this second in time, before the nerfs hit, then it really is a question of, can your deck beat mage, especially if you're going to be playing it on ladder?
Yeah, and it really does seem like a lot of these decks can put up a better fight against mage than has been expected. And I think, if you follow me on Twitter, and you should follow me on Twitter, I'm great. You probably heard me bang this drum pretty consistently, is that mage isn't random. It does very consistent things in a very specific order when it hits Deck of Lunacy. So there are holes that can be exploited. And I think, Penflinger and direct damage, for example, is something that can exploit that hole very well, which is why Paladin has a reasonable win rate. One of the big reasons why Warma was able to get over the line in that previous game, but also the ability to just go hyper control and just play like a kill 'em all deck to deal with maybe the 7 to 8 decent sized boards that they're going to make over the course of a game. That's a strategy that you can go with as well, and that's, I think, somewhere where we're seeing people go with these priest decks. And again, generally, if you look at the win rate, mage is sub 50% in Grandmasters right now. Now, that's not a statistic to overreact to, as we said in the intro, because the deck is being heavily targeted. So, for a deck to be being successfully targeted, you'd want to see it more in the 30s or high 30s at best.
Right.
You don't want it hanging around at 45%, because that means that deck is still doing a reasonably good job, even though every other player who is leaving it up is trying to hate it out of the format. So mage is still doing fine, but those numbers do show that there are gaps where you can pick up wins, and that is what both of these players with their respective bands of priest and paladin are trying to exploit.
Yeah, and again, I'm just interested because I've seen so many builds of priest lately, Soto, like everything from the hard miracle priest, which is what the 4 or 5 minion total combo style deck. We see this control list, we've seen Cthulhu styles as well, so I'm excited just to see how this one specifically plays out. We see already post Mulligan RDU just keeping hold of that Ogre Mancer, whereas Warma, I do like this, keeping the devolving missiles. There are obviously arguments where throw everything that isn't lunacy, but I think devolving missiles, especially versus say priest or even potentially paladin, is so strong that keeping hold of it and making sure it doesn't get transformed is a good idea from the way I look at it.
I struggle to agree. I think if you were playing against like Miracle Priest, right, where they're just all in on Sethics and so on, and hitting that devolving missile early on a Sethic is actually a really big deal. Sure, like I know this deck will buff things and make them huge, but my goodness, like Deck of Lunacy is just like a 70% mulligan win rate card, right? You are supposed to look for that card as aggressively as you possibly can. And I think, keeping a 52, 53% win rate card, whatever Devolving Missiles ends up being, in place of a 70 is something that I'm going to find very difficult to justify.
How much do you think the previous game impacted the Warma's choice? You saw what Lunacy did and it didn't do much.
It's possible.
Here anyway, RDU gets a nice early Mankrik down on board, which again, the minion you actually play isn't that mind-blowing, but it's still just a spider tank, right? It's still definitely not bad. It's not like you forego loads of stats to have this shuffle in deck effect.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You see Warma here wasting no time using that Devolving Missiles for tempo, which, having not agreed with the keep, I actually do like the way he just used it, which is if you're going to keep it, use it early and use it to seize tempo. Don't necessarily look for a big blowout buff or anything, just use it to grab the board as quickly as you can, and that is absolutely what he's done here. And now normally, an Ogremancer that is going to come down and be an absolute terror against most builds of the deck, not a big problem here, actually, for Warma, because he just has the perfect card to play in response to it.
That being a Pexis Blast? I'm kind of being serious, right? Because he could still kill the Ogremancer with a Pexis Blast like now and get the trade anyway.
This isn't just a Jam Jandis kind of turn, huh? Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I initially did look at Jandis, I think, especially with our playtesting the other day. We both know the strength of that card right now, but I think it was just because you still gain a minion and you actually remove the Ogremancer from the board as well. So I think that was probably enough. As you can see now, Warma still has a very scary board and then still has Jandis ready to play next turn if needed.
Yeah, so I suppose looking at it, because he'd already used the Devolving Missiles as well, if he just develops minions and then RDU in response just plays like one removal spell plus Apotheosis, right? Then suddenly that huge minion on the other side of the board is kind of difficult to deal with because you don't want to just chuck a sequence of spells at it because it's an Ogremancer. So you'd end up sort of having to trade your entire board into this big Apotheosis minion on the other side. So I guess on further examination, just in the context of the game, that does make sense.
Warma going to get the free attack. This minion, when it gets Frenzy, which is the new keyword, of course, it gets to do another attack to a random opponent. And there's no random opponents if there's only face left, and suddenly RDU's down to 13, and there's a Fireball in hand. Is this a Mazaki turn?
I mean, is it a Fireball turn, Raven? More importantly, there's Mask of Cthulhu for next turn. Like, he can just straight up set up lethal here. Mask of Cthulhu is going to deal 10 damage in total. So not only is RDU in range of that directly, but he's going to have to protect from the minions on board as well, right? Because normally what you can do is just straight throw out health onto the board to soak up that damage. But those minions are there to be able to just go face or trade out some of those minions so the mask can go face. So it's super difficult to get out of range. RDU is going to find a way with the clear plus flash heal, but Warma has held back that Ruined Orb, which played around this situation. He didn't go straight up max damage over 2. He went max damage over the course of the game by weaving in the ping and holding back the Ruined Orb instead of throwing that at face.
Very interesting to see how this plays out as well, because although there's that plan, he could just play Jandis this turn. He just saw Hysteria. And again, Hysteria coming in clutch there for RDU, kind of what I was mentioning at the start of the day, where Hysteria feels at this moment in time so cheap comparatively to what it does. It really gets the job done. But Warma's saying, no, I'm just going to use the mask, get full mask damage to face. But if RDU can get hold of some more healing, that's not it.
I'm not sure I like this just based on the way like the back and forth develops, because by Warma not developing anything here, right, he doesn't have immediate lethal in his hand currently. So if RDU just heals up a bit and then just plays a minion, for example, suddenly Warma has to respect Apotheosis again, right? And then go back to dealing with minions. Whereas if he played the minions first, that's not an issue.
Exactly, because I completely agree. If the problem is, if there's heal, then you don't have a board. Whereas if this turn looks like it could be a Jandis turn anyway, and if that was the case, or that was even likely to be the case, why not just always do it the other way around? So yeah, I'm pretty with you on this.
I wonder.
The counter-argument, of course, is he saw an empty board, so he took his Mask of Cthulhu where he knew it was going to do 10 damage to face, which isn't always the case. Just to pay proper respect to the other side of the argument, even though we don't necessarily agree with it. It is justifiable. It's just personally for me, I think that was the other way around.
There is
also questionable
Go on.
Questionable whether RDU was supposed to play the Sethic that turn instead of the Watch Post, because the Watch Post cannot attack and get, you know, beefiness out of Apotheosis, whereas having a Sethic live on the board there, he actually would have been able to immediately heal with an Apotheosis this turn. Obviously, that's a huge risk, because you're exposing one of your only good cards in hand just to being removed, but I feel like if Warma throws spells at your minions at this point, that's kind of a win for you.
Yeah, well, doesn't really matter in the long run, because this looks like it's going to get more than enough damage done here for Warma. And this is what I was going to touch on here, where, you know, Refreshing Spring Water plus Mozaki this turn looks very, very nice indeed, right? This just auto buffs all the damage.
Isn't this just lethal already?
This is just a troll, right? You just ruined all.
Yeah, he's just popping off. Yeah. He already has it.
He's just saying, even if you did something, this is what I was going to do. And even that Ruin Orb cost him 4. Still some mana left over to do some other things. Now it's going to be our game number 4. And now it's going to be our match number 1 as well, as Warma takes it over RDU. And honestly, he's going to be feeling fantastic with a bit of a rough season last season. Warma, you know, not only getting to today, of course, but now, you know, booking a spot there in tomorrow in this decider match by taking down RDU. You've got to, you know, chalk that one up as a very good day, Sottle.
Yeah, you absolutely have. And, you know, I think Warma is a player that I called on to show us a bit more this season. I think that's absolutely the case. I do think, you know, of the players who have been promoted into the Grandmasters system, it's been kind of a mixed bag up until this point. I'm very excited, for example, about Letta this season. As I've already mentioned, I think he could be a real standard bearer for the format. But some of the players who've come in have been fantastic. Some of the players who've underperformed, and Warma quite clearly is in that other bracket, because it's only kind of that little safety net that he had from his Masters Tour earnings. That means he is still here for an additional season to begin with. So he really has to improve on his performances from last year to, you know, have a chance of staying in there this time around, especially with the increased relegation spots. But, you know, so far so good. Even though we disagree with some plays, it's rare that I get through a series without disagreeing with at least one Hearthstone play, and that doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong. You know, it's just kind of what I'm here to do. So I think Warma has the W to his name.